Hi and welcome to my playthrough of Pacific War, The Struggle Against Japan 1941 to 45. Today we're having a look at the engagement scenario number 3, and it is the first invasion of Wake Island on December the 11th, 1941. So what's special about this scenario? Well, it's actually the fact that Wake has a fortress. This is rather problematic. So the mission for the Japanese player is to invade and take control of Wake Island. But before we continue, I would just like to advise you to turn on the Klingon subtitles. That's where I can correct any errors or mistakes I make during this playthrough. Before we get going, I would like to introduce some new counters. First of all, we have a look at the small base counter here at Wake Island. You can see 3 numbers at the bottom row, and to the left, bottom left, we have the troop quality, and in the middle with a small number we have the flak strength, and in the bottom right we have the launch capacity. And launch capacity is how many steps that can be launched from the base at one single air mission. Also, you see in the upper right and left, you see the port icon and an airfield icon. So let's elaborate a bit on that. Since you can see in the Wake Island hex, there is an airport symbol there. That means that we can create an airfield there. But there is no anchor symbol. That means that even though the small base counter shows an anchor symbol, it still has no capacity to be a port for any type of ship. In order to be able to base ships, you need to either have a anchor symbol in the hex. Hex has to be an atoll island, or it has to be a restricted water hex. And if it's any one of those 3, then it means that you can base 3 ships there. Those 3 ships can only be non-capital ships, or it can be one CVS anchored there. The next counter introduced is the fortress counter. So you can see 2 numbers on this counter. In the bottom right corner you see the number of hits it can take, or how many steps it has. Actually there is a errata here also. The rule book states 5, but the accurate number is 3 as on the counter. So the counter is correct. Above that you see the 0, and that's the naval combat strength for short range naval combat. And lastly we introduce ground forces. In this case the 1st Marine Battalion. And in the bottom left you can see the troop quality, and this is important for resolving combat. The interesting thing about troop quality, it is introduced when the unit takes step losses, like most other numbers. So this troop quality is 6, and in the middle you see the 0, that's the flak rating, and in the bottom right you see the number of step losses it can take, in this case 1. And in the middle top you see the size of the unit. In this case it means battalion. You can also see that there is a fighter aircraft based at Island. It only has 1 step left, since it has 5 hits already, and the maximum, as we know from before, is 6. Below that I put the submarine patrol counter just to remind myself that when the Japanese task force enters Wake Island, it will be attacked by a submarine once. Okay, and to the right in Task Force 1 you see the Japanese units. So 2 light cruisers and a transport destroyer. Also in Kwajalein you see twin engine aircraft based at a small base here. And it has 2 steps left. Okay, one more aspect of this scenario that we have to discuss is the fact that there is a fortress at Wake Island. This makes the amphibious assault that the Japanese have to do rather complicated, because the scenario is only 1 battle cycle, and the thing is that if you move make an amphibious assault and you enter the hex this battle cycle, you're not allowed to disembark and do the assault if there are naval units in the hex, and in this case actually fortress counts as a naval unit. Meaning if we want to win this scenario, we need to destroy the fortress before being able to make the invasion. The other way to make such an invasion, of course, is if you have more than 1 battle cycle available, then you can enter in the first battle cycle and then you wait until the next battle cycle, and then you can actually invade, even though there are enemy naval units in the hex. But this is not the case in this scenario, so we have to destroy the fortress. Okay, before we begin the scenario instructions are that we are allowed to make 3 air missions or airstrikes on Wake Island with the aircraft we have based at Quaya Line. Before the battle cycle actually starts, we do this. So the first thing we do is the air mission preliminary procedures. In this case, we designate Wake Island as the airstrike target. And we also figure out that the strike is coordinated, and the reason it's coordinated is, of course, it's only one unit attacking, and then it's always coordinated. And then we move the air units. So in this case, it has a range of 16, and the range to the target is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we have to get back, so we only need 14, so we are within range. And at the moment we enter the hex, the American player has option to search for the aircraft, and he will do that. So in order to find the aircraft, we have to roll 6 or less. And we roll a 1. So the search is successful, so the aircraft at the base are alerted. Now we designate this aircraft as Combat Air Patrol or CAP. The next thing we have to do is designate strike target. So the target of this mission, of course, is the fortress that we need to destroy before being able to amphibiously assault the island. After that comes the CAP procedure. So in this case, like I said, this aircraft is the Combat Air Patrol, and this becomes an escort. Had there been fighters on the Japanese side, these primarily would have been forced to be the escort, but in this case we have no fighters, so we only have these twin-engine bombers, so it becomes the escort. And then we roll simultaneously on the air and naval combat chart. So we start with American fighter. It has a modified strength of 6 minus 5, so 1, and we roll 3. So let's see. So that's a miss, and then the Japanese player returns fire. And we roll a 0. Okay, let's see. And that actually produces 1 hit on the American player. So this fighter is destroyed. So that's quite nice, because now we don't have to worry about the fighter attacking us during the next 2 attacks we will be doing. Okay, the next thing that happens is flak roll, and we get the 5. That's probably nothing. Yeah, the flak has no effect. And then we resolve the attack on the fortress. The airstrike on the fortress, and we have a strength of 5 minus 4, so a modified strength of 1 for ground target. And we roll a 1. So a 1 is 1 hit on the fortress. So the first strike is almost down. The only thing we have to do is the air mission conclusion procedure. Since we took no step losses, we don't have to reorganize any aircrafts. So the Japanese aircraft returns to base, and then we do the second strike. And we have to redo the search roll, so the American player searches for the aircraft attacking for the second time. 4, so they are found, meaning that we resolve flak combat, the first thing we do. And with the flak combat strength of 1, we roll a 1, so that should be a hit, I guess. So that's 1 hit on the Japanese, and that's unfortunate, because now the chances of destroying the fortress became very slim. So let's see, we do the attack on the fortress with air, and we roll an 8. That's a miss. So it returns, and then it comes back again for the third and last strike, and we do another search, and this time we roll an 8, meaning that there won't be flak before attacking, and then we have a modified combat strength of 0, attacking the fortress again, and we roll a 0 actually. Oops. So that becomes 1 hit, and then we roll for the critical. Wow, we roll a 0 again. Somebody might think I actually did this on purpose, but honestly, I just rolled the dice. So that means oh no, another 0 is actually no more hits. So 1 more hit on the fortress. So we have managed to make 2 hits on the fortress and the aircraft returns. So this actually means that the fortress was not destroyed, since it can take 3 hits. And that means also that the Japanese player fails the mission. Of course, we want to continue because we are trying to learn the rules here. So let's just assume that I managed to destroy the fortress for the purpose of learning more rules that will be included in the video. So we remove the fortress anyway. But before we finish the airstrike, we have to roll for flak also. So strength of 1, and we roll a 0. And that is actually 1 hit on the Japanese aircraft, meaning it is destroyed. So now we can actually begin the scenario. So like I said, the Japanese player has lost the scenario, but we continue just to learn the process. So now we actually begin with the lighting phase, and it's already established by the scenario that it's daytime, and advantage determination, same thing there. The Japanese player has the advantage, and then we come into the advantage moment phase, and this is when things start happening. So we're going to move the Japanese task force, and during moment the American player has the option to search. He can start searching immediately if he wants to, but he only gets 1 chance to find the task force, and he wants to improve his odds, and he's quite sure it's going to wake. So basically we wait with the search roll. The task force can move 0, 1 or 2 spaces, so it moves 1, 2, and when it enters the hex, the American player has the option to search for the task force. So we find the search chart, and if we look at it, we can see that searching for naval during day, we have a 90% chance of actually finding the task force. If we roll a 9, we fail. And we roll a 1, meaning that the task force has been detected in the hex of Wake Island. So now we have the option to disembark the Japanese. And like I said earlier, but it's worth repeating, had the fortress still been in the hex, we wouldn't be able to disembark the Marine, because you cannot disembark in the same turn that you move the task force if there is an enemy naval unit in the hex. And of course, the fortress counts as a naval unit in this case. But as we said, the fortress is gone, so the Japanese player disembarks in the hex. Okay, that concludes the advantage movement phase. We have nothing else we want to move on the Japanese side. And then we continue to the advantage air mission. So had the Japanese aircraft not been destroyed, we could have now made another airstrike at Wake Island. But this is not the case, so we continue into the naval combat cycle. And here it's worth mentioning, had the fortress still been at Wake, there would now be a naval combat actually between the fortress and the Japanese task force. And the special thing about that is that when you attack a fortress in a naval combat, then you use the gunnery strength of the ships and not the bombardment that you might think you use. You use the gunnery strength, but you resolve it on the line in the air naval combat chart. You resolve it on the bombardment on installation, but using the gunnery strength. That's a slight anomaly that it's good to remember. Anyway, since the fortress is gone, there is no naval combat cycle, and we move on to the bombardment phase. So the chances of the Japanese Marine beating the American Marine is quite slim. The only chance for us to succeed with this is if we can manage to bombard the American a little bit. But I just realized I forgot something. When the task force entered the hex, the American player gets 1 shot with a submarine. On a 0 or on a 1, he hits the task force. So we resolve that first. And we roll a 5, so that's unsuccessful, and the submarine has had its chance. So in order to resolve bombardment, we look at the bombardment strength of the ships in the hex, and we have a 2, 2, and a 1, and they are resolved individually. And the target, of course, is the American Marine Battalion. And one thing to notice here is that if we manage to get the result, and if you look at the combat chart, the only result we can obtain is actually a troop quality check. And according to the rules, you can only force a ground unit to take 1 troop quality check per bombardment phase. So if we succeed on one of the attacks, then we can stop, because it's only forced to do one troop quality check. So we start with Tenryu, which has a bombardment of 2. And we roll an 8, so that's a miss. And then we do the Yubari with the bombardment of 2. And we roll a 1. That's probably something. Yeah, that's a troop quality check for the American Marine Battalion. So now we look at the troop quality, which is 6, and we have to roll 6 or less in order to succeed with the troop quality check. So we roll, and we roll a 0, so that's successful. Which is bad news for the Japanese. Now they will have a big problem invading the Hex. But let's continue. And the next phase we come into is ground combat. So the first thing that happens in a ground combat is that we decide lead units. In this case it's easy, it's only 1 unit on each side, so both of these are the lead units. The next step is that we compare the troop quality and find in the chart what troop quality differential column we'll be using. So what we do is actually look at the troop quality of the attacker, and since this is an amphibious assault, it's halved to 3.5 and it's rounded up, so it becomes a 4 versus the 6 of the American. And in the table, if you look at attacker 4 and the defender 6, we get troop quality differential column of 8. Okay, so like I said, column 8, and then we check for troop quality differential column shift modifiers. And since this is in a clear hex, there are no shifts, so we're still in column 8. And then there is also a die roll modifier depending on the size ratios, but they're both size 1, so the ratio is 1:1, and it has no effect, this table. So basically we roll on column 8, and we roll a 8. And then we look on 8, we roll on column 8, and we roll an 8, and then we check the size to the left, and you add the sizes of the units, and in this case it's 2, so we follow that line, and we see that the attacker takes 2 losses, and the defender takes 0 losses, and the attacker also has a mandatory retreat. But we don't have to worry about the retreat, because the Japanese battalion is, of course, in this case, destroyed. So that concludes the scenario with the failed Japanese attack on Wake Island. The lesson learned is fortresses are tough, they complicate things a lot, and the thing you need to do, of course, is have more time that you can enter the hex and then stay one battle cycle, and then you can invade, even though there are enemy naval units in the hex. So I want to thank you for watching this video, and if you like what you see, please like and also consider subscribing. It helps me a lot. Thank you, and bye-bye until next time, which will be engagement scenario number 4.